I'm going to start this video off by showing you these 6 screenshots. These are all my accounts that have been permanently banned by Wargaming. I know things, say things, and do things they don't want me to do, and this is their response to it. When Wargaming bans an account, I just go and borrow more. So, the reason I'm showing you this is that so you can understand I'm not a community contributor. I'm not a puppet for Wargaming like most other CCs are. I have no allegiance to them. Quite the contrary. The information I will present to you through this video is factually correct. I have no reason to make up information to defend Wargaming. I want to know, as much as everybody else, the one dying question. The question I had when I started this project, and the question you have right now. Is World of Tanks rigged? The term rigged is thrown around a lot, used with a variety of different meanings, but let's agree on one definition. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines rigged as manipulated or controlled by deceptive or dishonest means. So, the question can be restructured. Is the World of Tanks game mechanics manipulated or controlled by deceptive or dishonest means? I called in an expert on World of Tanks conspiracies to bring me up to speed on what makes World of Tanks rigged. He will provide me with the conspiracies, and I'll return him a rebuttal using facts and knowledge.
Thank you, Chems. It is very obvious that Wargaming bugs their game to achieve a desired outcome. It's games per hour, and it's why everything has been designed to maximize player dissatisfaction and force you to pay up in an attempt to
Okay, take it easy. Give me an example of a commonly believed conspiracy about World of Tanks.
Russian bias. Wargaming is a Russian company made by Russian activists trying to push Soviet propaganda and trick the West into supporting Russia. The Russian government is involved.
Russian bias, okay. The idea that Russian tanks are shown favoritism through their improved stats. Okay, let's look into this. What would be the best way to determine if Soviet tanks perform better than all other nations? We could use a data tracking service such as TomatoGG to see how they perform. We could sort by highest win rate and count how many Soviet tanks appear. As of making this video, there are 706 tanks in World of Tanks. So let's look at the top 110 best performing tanks. I picked 110 because there are 11 nations in World of Tanks, so in theory, each nation should have 10 tanks in the list for it to be equal, right? We can visualize it with this graph here. Notice each nation is at 10 tanks. This is the ideal. This data was taken on October 22nd, 2023. This is the idealized theoretical scenario. Let's see what it is in reality. Okay. The Soviet tech tree contains the most vehicles in the top 110 highest win rate. So, this is clear evidence that there's Soviet bias, right? Well, no, not really. Look at the nations with the top tanks. The USSR, USA, and Germany, followed by the UK and France. This seems like the order of most tanks to least. These nations have the most vehicles in the game. Let's include the amount of tanks each nation has in total. So the yellow is how many tanks that nation has, and the red is how many tanks in the top 110 that nation has. And they show quite a correlation. As you can see, the highest win rate tanks are also the most numerous tanks. So really, we're not ranking win rate here. We're ranking how many tanks each nation owns. It is true that a higher proportion of Soviet tanks are in the top 110 compared to all other tanks, but that's also true of the USA. Nobody has ever considered World of Tanks to have American bias. What is true though is that Germany suffers. So, is there a better way to determine if there is Russian bias? Yes, we could just take the average win rate of each nation and compare them. Let's have a look. As we can see, the Soviet nation has the highest win rate on average. This clearly means that the Soviet tanks are performing the best. Russian bias is confirmed by this table right here. How could it not be? Well, again, this table is not entirely accurate. taking an average works when all the tanks are more or less equally represented. But in World of Tanks, it's not. Let me explain what I mean. Let's take 4 tanks. Okay, here we are. They all have a 50% win rate. This means the average of all 4 tanks is, well, 50%. Now, if one tank's win rate is actually 60%, then the average of all of them is 52.5. It's the same math that was used for the table shown earlier. However, there's one critical piece of information missing, which is the amount of games played. Okay, so let's say the first 3 tanks, right here, have been played 10,000 times. In, I don't know, the past month, week, whatever, it doesn't matter, but they've been played 10,000 times. But the tank that has a 60% win rate has only been played 1,000 times. Maybe it's a rare premium tank, a Clan Wars reward, a rental, or even like an unreleased tank, because Tomato GG shows unreleased tanks. What now? This is called a weighted average. In this case, a battle weighed average. Taking the battles into account, the battle weighed win rate is 50.3%. That's much less than the previously calculated 52.5. So, what happens when we take the battle weighed average win rate of each nation? As it turns out, the Soviet tech tree is actually right dab smack in the middle average. In fact, it seems like China, Czechoslovakia, and France are the overpowered nations. See if you can think why. We will touch on this later. So, let's develop a ranking system so we can compare many different attributes together. It's simple. We just take the ratio of each value compared to the average of all the nations. If the average is 50% and your nation is 50%, that's a ratio of 1. If we take the weighted average of win rate, WN8, and damage per game, generate a score and combine them, we get what I'm calling each nation's OP score, overpowered score. A score of 1 means the nation is performing perfectly average. Higher than 1 means it's overperforming compared to the rest of the nations. And less than 1 means that nation is underperforming compared to the rest. I did this on 3 different dates. July 19th, 2022. Then I waited. January 29th, 2023. Then I waited again. October 22nd, 2023. Let's take a look at the nation's OP score for the most recent sample, October, for all the tanks. Czechoslovakia was ranked the highest with a score of 2.453. Japan was ranked the lowest with a score of 0.313. The USA ranked nearly a perfect 1, so American tanks as a whole are perfectly balanced. The USSR ranked 0.834, which is underperforming. Okay, but let's look at Tier 8 tanks only. After all the most overpowered tanks are Tier 8 premiums, which Wargaming gets by selling. The USSR ranked at 0.923, which is still better, but ultimately it's underperforming, it's less than 1. The top nation's placement makes sense when you consider what tanks they have. Czechoslovakia has only 5 tanks at Tier 8, 2 of which are good. The Skoda T56 is one of the best Tier 8 tanks in the game, whereas a nation like the United Kingdom has 20 tanks at Tier 8, with only like 1 or 2 of them being good. It seems like there is a Czech bias. Italy has the Progetto 46 and its identical skinned version, the Mars. Italy also has tanks like the Bizante and the Vipera, which, maybe aren't categorized as crazy OP, but they definitely are the easiest tanks to play, which gives them a higher win percentage. China has the BZ-176, which is like single-handedly changed the matchmaking forever, being probably the most overpowered tank, and for the first quarter of 2023, the most played tank. That's right, a premium you had to gamble for, through loot boxes, had more games played in it than any free-to-obtain tech tree tank. In fact, let's look at China's placement in July 2022 and how it changes when the BZ-176 is released in January 2023. China went from a very slightly above average score of 1.084 to 1.473 at Tier 8 just because of the BZ-176. That is how influential an overpowered tank can be on a nation's score. Now, with that in mind, why doesn't the USSR have a massive score? To me, that says there just aren't enough overpowered tanks in the USSR nation, or they're not overpowered enough to make a substantial difference to the nation as a whole. Do you get what I'm trying to say here? Let's look at some more examples, okay? July 2022, at Tier 10, Sweden ranked second most OP nation with a score of 1.191. By January 2023, it was in 6th place with a below average score of 0.978. What happened? Well, between those two dates, in September of 2022, the Kronvan was nerfed. I would like to mention that all these comparisons have had the use popularity in OP score setting disabled. So basically, I'm not multiplying the score by how many games are being played, the popularity. I did that at first, but then I changed it because we know from the Progetto 65 that popularity does not mean a tank is overpowered. We know that, but Wargaming doesn't. The Kronvan was a battle pass tank and was very popular, which would inflate Sweden's score to 3.182 had I considered how many games are being played. But even when its popularity is being ignored, I disabled that setting. Strictly looking at only how it performs, Sweden is an OP nation because of the Kronvan before it was nerfed. So I repeat the question, where exactly is the nation-defining tank for the Soviets? If their nation is so overpowered, how come they are statistically performing normally? Let's think of some OP Russian tanks, okay? The Object 279E, yeah, okay, OP. And the Object 2684, it could be considered OP, but man, that thing was nerfed pretty hard. So, it's still a good tank, but it's not overpowered. The Object 907 is a good tank, I guess. Not really OP nowadays. What else? The 260? No, it's not. The IS-3A was actually considered really OP all those years ago, but it's hardly competitive now. The 703 is still a very strong tank, but I don't think most people would outright call it overpowered, so... Where's this idea of Russian bias coming from? It could be from the decisions by Wargaming, like the time they nerfed the Progetto 65 heavily while barely nerfing the Object 430U. That was a clear example of Russian bias by Wargaming's part. Okay, maybe, but neither tanks are really that competitive, right? So the game itself doesn't show signs of Russian bias. Maybe Wargaming loves Russia, but the game they make doesn't really show signs of Russian bias. The game has a premium tank bias, specifically newer premium tanks. Wargaming released and buffed Progetto 46. And remember, the Progetto 65 before the nerfs, right when it was released. Italy is now OP. Wargaming released the Skoda T56, the VZ55 line, the Shit Pack. Czechoslovakia tanks are now OP. The BZ-176 is released. China is now OP. It's not the nation. It's whatever brand new tank Wargaming releases that's even more OP than the last tank. Now, I'm making this video right before Christmas loot boxes, so I don't know what OP tank they'll be releasing next. However, take a look at what nation that tank belongs to and see if that nation's score increases because of it. I left the Excel sheet I'm using in the description, so you can fill out the information yourself if you want to. Just select the tanks on Tomato GG and paste them in. Do a little bit of formatting and whatever. Does Wargaming have favoritism towards Russia itself? I don't know. But does Wargaming show favoritism to Soviet tanks in their game? No, they don't. Have a look at this graph of the nation's OP score over time at Tier 8. I may continue to expand this graph over time and post it in the description of this video. But you can see what nation increases and decreases based on whatever tank is released.
Community contributors get special gun accuracy RNG so that their gameplay looks more appealing to their audience. And World of Tanks seems better than it really is. Just look at any big streamer's gun accuracy RNG. They hit shots that none of us would ever be able to. You know why? Because their guns are more accurate than ours.
Okay. Aren't you a community contributor? So where's your special RNG? Okay, you know what? Whatever. What if there was a way to test this theory? To test the average shell deviation on a CC's account, right? Versus a regular account. Well, there is a way. Introducing the Accuracy Tracker mod, made by good friends of mine, the Bulldog and Nikita. This mod logs the shell deviation after every shot in a log file. This file can be formatted with a special program and then imported into Excel for analysis. Now, if only there was someone who regularly played on a CC account and a regular account.
Hello gamers, it is I, Dakilzor, and I have an NA account which is not part of the CC program, and I also have my main account on EU which is part of the CC program. I installed the Accuracy Tracker mod and tracked my true shot dispersions for several months, after which I gave all the data to chems. I'm eager to see the results. Is CC RNG real, or is it just tomato scoping over my 10k damage games?
Excellent. I also installed the mod for myself so we can compare my account's data to yours. And as I said before, I play on many different accounts, so there's really no way Wargaming could tamper with all of them. I said this already, but I'll remind you again. I'm not a community contributor. My shot dispersion stats should be the same as yours. Yours as in the average player, not a CC. So, let's first compare Daki's CC and non-CC account data. In case you haven't picked up, CC means community contributor, right? It's a special type of account that people who make videos or streams use. I will be using a null hypothesis to compare. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Okay, fine, I'll give you the quick rundown so you know what's going on. If you want to compare two things against each other, the easiest way is just to take their average and compare them, right? Okay, this average, that average. This works on a very basic level, but you can't make any scientific conclusions with that because it's primitive. Instead of using just the average, or mean, average and mean are the same thing. A null hypothesis uses the mean, standard deviation, and sample size. So let's visualize it. If we just compared these two averages, we get something that looks like this. Just 2 points on a number line. There we go, 50% and 51%. By this comparison, it would suggest that NA win rates are better than EU win rates. Now, if you gotta think further, is that because NA players are better? Or because there's less players? Maybe there's just more veterans, and on EU, there's more new players, because there's much more people playing on EU. We can't just go based on averages alone. If we want to go deeper, we can include the sample standard deviations. What's that? It's sort of like the range of values that make up the average. What we're doing is comparing how much these two distributions overlap.
Cabs, you're assuming that shot deviation follows a normal distribution when in reality shots are determined randomly through a uniform distribution?
To that I say, eat shit and die. If they line up perfectly, this results in a 100% match. If they do not line up at all, there's almost a 0% match. This is an oversimplification, but you get the idea. Alright, so now for the test. I'll be comparing a score I made up, so we don't need to play the same tanks in order to compare the accuracies. See, think of it this way. Obviously, if one account plays only the KV2 all day long, and the other account plays only the Leopard, well, obviously the second account will seem like it has better shot RNG. He's only playing accurate tanks. The score is basically the dispersion at 100 meters, that's given to you by World of Tanks, divided by the actual dispersion of the shot. This means that if the shot you fired was super accurate and only deviated by a tiny amount, the score is very large. If the shell deviates by a lot, the score is very low. Having the accuracy in the numerator means that you're comparing it to its listed accuracy. So in theory, CC accounts and non-CC accounts should be the same. Let's have a look at the result. Cannot reject null hypothesis. Our null hypothesis means they are the same. If we cannot reject that, that means it's true. They are the same. So a CC account and a non-CC account, so just a normal account, have the same dispersion scores. I know. Looking at the average scores, it's clear that the CC account on average has a higher score, meaning that account gets better gun accuracy on average. But this is why the null hypothesis test exists, to take into account the fact that the standard deviation for the CC account is also much higher, and there are far less samples to choose from. So ultimately, with that in mind, the math says no, there is no difference. Here's the percentage of shots scored in a graph. Notice how their purple and green colored bars are pretty much at similar heights. Here's it shown as a line graph. It's easier to see it that way. So it's quite clear that they are more or less the same. Okay, but both accounts are owned by the same guy, DaKillzor, who is a community contributor. So what if Wargaming secretly gave his non-CC account some special accuracy bonus so he or his viewers wouldn't notice a difference between the two? Okay, let's compare his CC account's shot data with my own shot data, with my normal account. Well, it seems to be the same result. Again, we can take a look at the histogram and see the score distributions are nearly identical. Wait, hold on a minute. What's going on with that low score region? Why do I have a spike there? This means I get a lot more really bad misses than DaKillzor does. A score of 1. Looking at the line graph show this more clearly. What the hell is going on? Maybe I do get worse RNG than the rest of you guys. That would explain the crazy RNG in my videos. Okay, in all seriousness, this is most likely a negligible difference. I know it looks crazy here, but it's a spike in a single score. There are hundreds of scores possible for any given shot, and it just so happens that a score of 1 happens more often. I bet if I had a larger sample size, this number would reduce. In reality, there's no difference between our accounts, and the math proved it right at the beginning. And math is far better at assessing things than just visually looking at the graph.
Does that mean people will stop commenting CCRNG on my videos?
Oh, hi, Kaizu. No, they probably won't.
If CCRNG is not real, how come people are so convinced it is? All the time people are commenting on my videos things like, you're not good, you just have CCRNG.
I think I know why, but it's more psychological than analytical. I will discuss this later, but for now, I'm just focusing on conspiracies that can be proven or disproven with evidence mathematically.
If you think I have CCRNG, just come watch 5 minutes of my streams and you'll see. I get fucked just as hard as you guys do.
Tanks have different sigma values. This is why certain tanks are less accurate than others, despite having the same accuracy value.
Okay, you often hear people talking about tanks having sigma values. When I hear someone say this, I know for a fact that they did not think of this on their own. They heard it from someone and are repeating what they said. How do I know this? Well, they call it sigma value. That doesn't make any sense. What they're referring to is standard deviation. Sigma is the name of a Greek letter. Standard deviation is shown with that Greek letter. Okay, look, it's like saying, what's your mass in M value? Hey, Skill, what's your M value? Nope, nobody talks like that. We say, what's your mass? And then you say, I'm 300 pounds. So what they mean to say is that tanks have different standard deviations. This basically means that, for example, 2 tanks, although having the same average dispersion, the one with the larger standard deviation means that they will have more super accurate shots and super horrific misses. Okay, this has already been disproven, by the way. You can read the full report by Overlord Prime, Ultimate Gun Mechanics Guide. He disproves it right there and then. But you don't even need to do any math to realize different standard deviations would be really noticeable. Let's do a thought experiment. If the standard deviation was larger for a vehicle, that would imply there is more shot spread. Same averages, but one has higher highs and lower lows. Well, you can only be so accurate until the difference is imperceptible, okay? So the lower lows will almost never be noticed, but you will notice the higher highs. Anybody can compare how many times a shot goes way out of center and realize that the tank has a higher standard deviation and thus it does it more often, but that's never been observed. So that's that. Bro, I don't want to hear none of that shit. Blah, blah, sigma values, because you're wrong in more ways than one.
Every time I have the kill shot on an enemy tank, I low roll or miss or bounce. This is more than just random bad luck. It's like the game knows and is trying to give the enemy a chance.
Is there any evidence that suggests you are more likely to low roll when the enemy is on a one-shot? Well, the best way we can determine this is by finding out what your average damage is. If your average damage is less than your gun's theoretical average damage, then you must be low rolling more often than you are high rolling, bringing the average down. Okay, let's look at the data. In my Skoda T56, I shot one-shot tanks, that being tanks with health around the same as my alpha damage of 460. In theory, my average damage should be 460, but in reality it's 428. What? So that must mean I'm low rolling shots more often, right? Well, no. Let me explain. The average damage of 460 means that the gun can roll as high as 575 and as low as 345, a max roll and a min roll. If we want to do more than 575 damage a shot, we would need to either set the enemy tank on fire or ammo rack them. Then our shot does more than our max roll. But both of these scenarios are pretty rare, so they are statistically insignificant. Now, think about the other side of this. Is there a way to do less damage than our min roll of 345 damage? Yes. If the tank you are shooting at has less than 345 health, then you will do less damage than a min roll. If I shoot a tank for 460, and he was left on 10 health, and I shot him again, I did 470 damage in 2 shots. That means my average is 235. See the problem? Of course the average damage is going to be less than your theoretical, because we quite often shoot tanks that are on very low health. So, what now? How can we test if RNG makes us low roll against one-shots? We need to figure out what the true average damage would be when considering one-shots. We can do this, but first we need to gather some data. Now, ideally, we'd get a whole lineup of tanks that have 460 health and have the Skoda T56 shoot them. And do this hundreds of times so we can see if half of them die or not. The problem is, getting a bunch of tanks with 460 health in a training room and then farming them over and over again would take a lot of people, a lot of time. It would take weeks, maybe even months to get any reasonable data from. So instead, I used a mod that would track the health and damage done of any tank within a certain range. On average, the mod tracked tanks that were around 452 health. It considered that to be a one-shot. Perfect. Now I play around 8 months worth of games, and that's where the tally of around 7,200 shots comes from. This is an average of around 5 games a day in the Skoda T56, in case you were wondering. Here is the distribution of shots. So, what does this mean? Is this good or bad? We need a reference to compare to. Luckily, and now this is a bit of a stroke of genius on my part, at the risk of me tooting my own horn, but we can use this shot data to generate a simulation of what the distribution should be. Since I'm not programming my simulation to have any rigged RNG low roll nonsense, the distribution that it generates represents the normal high and low roll probabilities. This, by the way, is called a Monte Carlo simulation. We're generating 30,000 samples. That should be good enough for the graph. So, for alpha damage, we generate a number between the min roll and the max roll, like as if you're firing a gun in the game, and the game is rolling damage for you. No fuckery involved. Now, the health column is a randomly generated normal distribution using the mean and standard deviation of the real world scenario. So, instead of guessing, like, oh, how often do you find a one-shot? I don't have to guess, I just use the average damage and the standard deviation. Damage dealt is simply comparing the two numbers. If my alpha damage is less than their health, I do the full damage my gun rolled. If their health is less than my damage roll, I only do their HP's worth of damage. In other words, if I shoot a tank on 1,000 health, I do my average damage of 460. But if they're on like 100 health, it doesn't matter what I roll, I'm doing 100 damage. Got it? This is what the distribution would look like when there is no altered RNG for one-shots. It looks pretty much identical to the real data. So, this conclusively proves that there is no such thing as low rolling more often when the enemy is a one-shot. There's simply no evidence it does, and plenty of evidence right here proving it does not.
Whenever you activate a booster, the matchmaking instantly becomes worse. They know you are locked in for 1 to 2 hours, so you are less likely to rage quit and stop playing if the matchmaker decides to put you on the losing team.
Okay, there's a problem with that theory, but let's talk about the scientific observations. It's incomplete. The problem is that to accurately test this, you have to do 2 tests on the same day of the week at the same time, otherwise the data would change too much, right? Like, think about it. A Saturday evening will have very different matchmaking than a Tuesday night, because the volumes of players drastically changes, and the types of players change too. I mean, we got everybody playing on Saturday, and only sweaties playing on a Tuesday night, so... This is the problem with testing anything regarding the matchmaker. There's just too much variation. But let's go back to our test. Let's say 1 week, I play from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on a Saturday evening, without any boosters, okay? Then I log the matchmaking and win rate. So, did I get in top tier games? Did I win those games? That sort of thing. I will have to wait until the next week to repeat the same experiment, but this time with boosters enabled, and see if I get better or worse matchmaking, or better or worse win rates. Considering there's only 52 weeks in a year, there just isn't enough time to get any meaningful data. And worse yet, the matchmaking during Christmas is much different from the matchmaking during summer holidays, right? There just isn't enough time to get any meaningful data. I tried this for a few months and the data suggests there isn't any difference, but it's a really small sample size, so who knows if it's true. I personally believe it's not true, and this myth is caused by a different reason, but I'll get into that later. Anyway, stupid players often believe that the outcome of the game is predetermined. Yes, I'm gonna go right ahead and call them stupid. The idea that the matchmaker would know the result of the match before it has even begun would imply that the matchmaker keeps track of player stats when pairing them up, which it doesn't. If it did, we'd have skill-based matchmaking where the teams are equal. That would be great. The idea that the matchmaker would purposely make imbalanced teams for the sole purpose of annoying you is asinine. The reason games can be so imbalanced is because the matchmaker does not care about stats of the players it puts into teams. Random chance means all it takes is for 1 or 2 really good players to be put on a team and they can snowball a win. I talked about this in my Why World Tank Sucks Part 2 video. It's also been pointed out that the patent for Wargaming's matchmaker can be viewed and scrutinized. And it's been shown that the matchmaker does attempt to adjust the matchmaking for players who've had too many wins or too many losses. If you've had too many wins, it'll just put you in a match where you're bottom tier. If you've been losing too much, it'll make you top tier. Now, people seem to use this as proof of rigging for some reason. Like, you know it works both ways, right? If someone else wins too much, they get put in a bottom tier in a different match, and you get to be top tier in this match. You know, it's a good thing, you know. Like, imagine if the matchmaker did not have this. A platoon of chieftains already stomps every game they're in. Now the matchmaker says, okay, you're winning too much, you're only fighting tier 10s now. It makes the games more balanced. If a dude spams his BZ-176 all day every day and cranks out a 65% win rate, he should be made to fight higher tiers more often, while the dude in a stock T69, barely managing a 45% win rate, should get the opportunity to fight some low tiers more often. This is necessary for a game like World of Tanks, which has vehicles that aren't really balanced at all.
RNG is different between players. Some get better RNG than others. It's how people get good stats. They have better RNG. I
think one of the biggest copes is that your RNG depends on your stats. We don't even need to perform any math to disprove this. It just takes like a little mental logic experiment. Just think about it for a second, okay? Good players claim that RNG works in favor of bad players, making up for their lack of skill by sometimes giving them favorable odds to encourage them to keep playing instead of getting curb stomped all the time. Okay, now look on the other side of the spectrum. Bad players claim that RNG is the only reason good players are good, because they somehow get better RNG, and so of course their stats would be better. Okay, so how could it be both? Okay, I've made no secrets before that I believe RNG helps bad players more than it hurts them. I'm not talking about rigged or anything, just the nature of randomness, and how lots of randomness hurts good players more than it helps them. But this is coming from a 10 kpr super unicum sweat such as myself. If I was an orange shitter, like I don't know, 600 win 8 or whatever, maybe I'd believe that the only way a player could achieve 6,000 win 8 is if they just got better RNG. Although to be clear, I never once thought that, even when I was a noob, but you get my point. We can go over another thought experiment. I've said this before, but I guess I'll say it again. Good players are not going to quit no matter how bad the game gets. They're not. The reason they're good is because they're heavily invested in the game. So they're not going to quit because they had a streak of bad games. They're always going to buy that new premium. They're always going to pay for premium time. You get my point. Bad players are usually casual players. If the game treats them poorly, they'll just stop playing. They'll get up and touch grass or play a different game. So it is in wargaming's best interest to cater to the bad players to keep them invested in the game. So what does that mean? Do shitters get better RNG? No. It just means that the nature of randomness means that anybody can get lucky, and getting lucky is more important to bad players than it is useful for good players. Alright, so another conspiracy I've heard comes from Jingles. He said that premium tanks perform better when they are first released than they are secretly nerfed after they're no longer being sold. Well, this is completely anecdotal. I don't know what else to tell you. The only way to test this would be to track performance when a tank first comes out, then later compare it to how it performs after an arbitrary amount of time. I don't know, a week, a month, a year. Allow me to respond to this anecdotal claim with my own anecdotal evidence. As you guys know, I used to make fun of the Barask for being trash because of its horrific gun handling. I genuinely hated it, and I believed it sucked ass. However, me and a buddy played it recently, and we actually quite enjoyed it. I literally said, and he agreed, I don't remember the Barask being this accurate. It was the same deal with the BZ-176 and Skoda T-56. I actually didn't like them when they first came out because of their gun handling. I thought, man, these tanks can't hit a shot to save their life. These tanks suck. But after a few months, I felt that they weren't so bad, and I came to enjoy them a lot more. So, there you go. You say tanks are shadow nerfed, but for me, it feels like they were shadow buffed. Both claims are meaningless. Let's move on. The Grille 15 has a special accuracy mechanic, making it less accurate than it really is. This kind of goes with the sigma value. We've disproved that, but maybe the Grille is a special case because it's quite clear the Grille 50's accuracy sucks. Like, there's something wrong with it, right? Well, its accuracy isn't necessarily different, but it is special in one regard. It has absolutely the worst in class turret traverse dispersion. This basically means the tiniest movements with your mouse creates the hugest bloom. This means that anytime you're looking for a weak spot, trying to lead your shot, or any other micro adjustment you'd make, just causes the Grille 15's accuracy to nosedive into the ground and your shot will miss. Now, even if you're fully aimed and you don't move at all, okay, dispersion while turning the turret doesn't matter, you're completely stationary, aimed at one point. Just because the Grille 15 has one of the best accuracies in the game, doesn't actually mean it's good. Look at this number line. If a tank with a dispersion of 0 means they are perfectly accurate, look at the huge gap we have to go through before we supposedly get to what we consider accurate tanks. The Grille 15's accuracy is closer to that of the IS-6 than it is to being perfectly accurate. So Klaus is kinda right about this, but right in the wrong ways. Accuracy in world tanks isn't so much of a big deal when you consider that all the tanks are inaccurate to a certain extent. I care more about bloom than I do accuracy. That's why the 703 seems so accurate. Its circle bloom is very small. You don't have to aim that much. Alright, light tanks get some special matchmaking to prevent you from getting scout maps, so you don't progress through the missions too quickly. Okay, now I could sit here and play light tanks all day, every day, track the maps that it gets and all that, but like, first of all, let's hold on a second. Why would they do that? Wargaming does not make any profit or lose any money when you complete a campaign mission, so why would they care if you complete them or not? Okay, besides, they can be completed only once, so why would they care about players getting them done too quickly? The conspiracy most likely originates from the fact that there is a map rotation in the game. So if a scout map is not in the rotation, you're gonna have to wait a few hours before it is. Additionally, how many light tank maps are there anyway? Okay, you've got Proc and Mali, right? Everybody knows those are the best maps to have lights on. A few more are okay, and the rest just suck. Like, they're just terrible. So maybe this isn't the matchmaker going out of its way to screw you over, but there's simply just not enough good scout maps in the game. Like, there are 40 maps in the game, and these 2 maps are the only maps where you could actually get some missions done. Of course it's gonna seem like you never get them. Alright, so what's the deal? Are all World of Tanks conspiracies false? Okay, look, I don't know. The ones I listed here seem to be, but I can sit here all day talking about conspiracies and waste months of time and energy trying to prove or disprove them. Or I can do something else. I can arm you with knowledge. What does that mean? Okay, I can bring to your attention a few ideas to consider, and then you can make your own decisions on whether or not to believe in a conspiracy. This goes beyond just World Tanks. This is useful for anything. It's about the mindset you're in when you make these observations. So now we begin the second third of this video. When I talk about mindset, it's not your grind set. I'm referring to how you process information, which then leads to you developing a set of beliefs, right? Okay, it's a trap many of us fall into, and it's a big problem not just in World Tanks. Okay, let me begin by introducing you to the first concept I want you to understand. Frequency illusion, put simply, is when you first learn about something, you start to notice it more often. When someone tells you popping a credit booster will result in worse matchmaking, you start to pay attention to the matchmaking after you pop a credit booster. Now it seems more common. If you came up with the idea that for some reason, you always low roll when you're shooting a one-shot, from henceforth, you will notice all the times you low roll when trying to finish off a one-shot tank. Probably experienced this outside of World of Tanks. If you were talking about or thinking about a certain subject, then suddenly you notice a YouTube recommendation on that very subject. Okay, this is not the algorithm somehow reading your mind. It was going to recommend that video to you anyway. But now that you've previously thought about that subject, it being recommended to you now seems weird. You've probably low rolled and high rolled one-shots all the time. But now that you've started to think about all the times you low rolled, that's what you're fixated on. And that goes on to the next cognitive effect. Confirmation bias. Well, more generally, it's selection bias, but we usually recall rigged situations retrospectively, so whatever, both terms are applicable here. You never remember the times when someone wasn't a one-shot, but you high-rolled them and killed them. Maybe you do, but we usually respond more strongly to negative scenarios. It's just how we survive. When you max roll someone, you think, cool, I max rolled them. If you even think anything at all. But if you min roll someone, you think, oh, of course, this stupid fucking game, low rolled again. And better yet, if it was against a premium tank, suddenly now you low rolled because it's a premium tank. You know, think of it this way. It's like the driver stereotypes in real life, okay? If someone cuts you off in traffic, they're an asshole. If someone cuts you off in traffic and is driving a BMW, then they're an asshole because they drive a BMW. You see what I'm trying to say here? This is how you can make stereotypes on everything. Woman drivers, Asian drivers, old Asian women drivers. Once you start to believe in a stereotype, you will focus on all the evidence that supports your belief and subconsciously ignore all the evidence against your belief. Nobody wants to be wrong, so you subconsciously ignore evidence you don't like. If you believe the game is rigged against you, you will seek out any evidence that supports your claim, and ignore all evidence that rejects it. I guarantee you there will be comments in this video that obviously haven't watched up to this point here, who will consciously reject the evidence I present to you here in favor of their own beliefs, because in their mind, they have gathered all the evidence in the world to support their belief. To them, it's real evidence they gathered over years of playing. But the problem is, it's incomplete evidence. It's a positive feedback loop, which is why it's so powerful. The law of truly large numbers is just a clever way of saying even things that are really rare can happen quite often when there's a large enough sample size. Like when you say, you're 1 in a million, but there's 8 billion people on the planet, so what you've just said is, yeah, you're just like 8,000 other people. When you consider how many times a player fires their gun in a single battle, how many players in the battle all firing their guns, how many games are played in an hour. I mean, the queue time is like 30 seconds most of the time, right? So that's a lot of games in an hour, a day, a week, a month. In fact, okay, let's do some quick math here. Let's say the average person fires 10 shots in a battle. Okay, 10 shots. Given 30 players in that one battle, that's 300 shots in a game. If the queue time is like 30 seconds, then okay, 120 games per hour. That's 3,600 shots in an hour. 864,000 shots in just one day. So, is it really that surprising when one game some jackass hits you with 2 snapshots in a row and you missed your fully aimed shot on their cupola 3 times in a row? The law of truly large numbers means that you will, at some point, miss 3 shots in a row against someone's cupola, whatever. This is also why CC RNG seems so real. When you watch a video of an epic game a CC had, they're not showing you the games where they missed all their shots or low-rolled an important target. They play hundreds of games a day, all day, every day of the week. It's their full-time job. So of course, eventually, they're gonna get some super epic good RNG game that they can show on their channel. Most people assume that since I'm a fairly large WoT YouTuber, I'm a community contributor. It's false, but they assume that. But they never accuse me of having CC RNG. You know why? Because I actually show my bad RNG in videos. Right here, in my video titled, "You will never have RNG like me." The top comment is, no, this perfectly represents what it's like to play WoT, okay? Most YouTubers don't show this kind of gameplay. So, most YouTubers come across as having better RNG. Kaizu's videos are an excellent representation of this, because they are highly edited with a lot of jump cuts. The bad RNG parts are removed, because, well, they're not interesting. He only shows clips of him hitting the crazy shots, not missing. You can tell by how the ammo count changes between jump cuts that this is not the status quo for this guy, alright? These are the cherry-picked examples of getting good RNG. Okay, you've probably heard of Occam's razor. It's quite simple. The simpler solution is often the correct one. Okay. Is your losing streak because you activated a credit booster, causing the wargaming matchmaking algorithm to suddenly squeeze you into losing games that, using its highly advanced AI, predetermined that the result would be a loss over the course of several games in a row in an attempt to stagnate your progress, which will then force you to play more and use more boosters in the future, which will require you to purchase them. Thus, the game has tricked you into buying more boosters, only for those boosters to be the reason that you're not progressing and thus in need of even more boosters! Or you had a losing streak. Yeah, it's pretty useful at completely disregarding any batshit insane conspiracies people like to come up with. So, they all come together nicely to create pretty much all of WoT's conspiracies. Frequency illusion means that now that you're paying attention to it, whether that be because someone told you, or your pattern recognizing brain picked up on a perceived pattern, the situations where you miss, for example, 3 fully aimed shots in a row, seem more frequent. Selection bias, and by extension confirmation bias, means that you now remember all the times you missed your fully aimed shots in a row, while ignoring all the times you actually did hit that cupola 3 times in a row. This is how conspiracies are made, and the lack of Occam's razor means that instead of saying, that's just a coincidence, you instead convince yourself the most outlandish theory must be true because, well, saying something is a coincidence just isn't as comforting. Alright, for the last third of this video, I'm going to talk about some components. There seems to be 3 components that create the World of Tanks phenomenon, which I will lay out here. Okay. The game. The actual gameplay of World of Tanks is quite strange. Never has there been a competitive game, at least I don't know of, with so much RNG involved. Okay, you fire your gun. Where the shell goes is dependent on RNG. If you hit the target, the shell penetration has plus minus 25% RNG. Okay, let's say you penetrate. The damage you do now has a plus or minus 25% RNG. Then there are the crits. Even if you are specifically aiming for them, there's pretty much a completely random chance of them happening. Okay, artillery fires at you. It either misses completely or direct hits your engine deck, both fully aimed. Either way, the damage that it does ranges from nothing to massive damage and a fire. A 183mm Hesh round hits the turret front, does 100 splash damage. Okay. The shell detonates 1 inch lower on the engine deck. 1000 splash damage. The shell hits 1 inch to the right. 0 damage, armor not hit. The entire 183mm shell of explosives just disappears. You drive off a cliff, you take 0 damage and an orange track. Or you take 1000 damage and half your modules are gone. The more that RNG is involved in the game, the more room there is to find weird patterns and make up conspiracies. People will pick up on random patterns that emerge and try to make sense of them. That's just the side effect of randomness. Speaking of people, it doesn't exactly help that the World of Tanks players are interesting. I mean, there's a game mechanic where you can be moderately competitive with just a mouse click every minute. That's not even a hyperbole. You don't need a keyboard when you can shoot anywhere on the map. This is talking about artillery. So if boomer shooters are fast-paced, high-action gameplay, then World of Tanks is quite the opposite of that. Funnily enough, attracts the same crowd, boomers. But it is important to understand what kind of people this game attracts. So these two synergize pretty well. Instead of yelling at CNN, they're yelling at wargaming.
Fucking kill it, goddammit, now! You fucking goddamn piece of shit! On this game, but you still have 25% are in fucking. Are you fucking shitting me right now? Who the fuck you want to play this fucking game?
The community. Community contributors, aka YouTubers and streamers, don't exactly help the situation. There's, of course, low-hanging fruit, Klaus Kellerman.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
As far as the source of misinformation viruses go, he's the Wuhan of World of Tanks. It's no great secret that most big World of Tanks names kind of hate each other. I may or may not have contributed to this, but it's safe to say that World of Tanks communities are highly polarizing. People hate QB, QB hates Skill, Skill hates Kaizu, Chems hates almost everybody hates Chems. The people have turned WoT communities into identity politics. If you watch someone that isn't accepted by the community you're in, you're ostracized. Saying certain names in streams gets you instantly banned. I can't imagine what it's like to be an outsider when they get immediately perma-banned from a stream they just found because they mentioned a name they shouldn't have. This community synergizes very well with the players. People who belong to a certain group will fight to death over some internet name, even when that person is wrong. And trust me, these people are wrong all the time, believe me. I mean, they play World of Tanks for a living. I mean, they should be instead going out and, get a job. Here's an example. Skill for LTU made a video claiming that Wargaming secretly buffed artillery 2 weeks after nerfing them. Basically, Skill and I guess nobody else involved with the making of his video understood what a moving average is. The moving average tracked the stats of artillery over the last, you guessed it, 14 days, 2 weeks. Skill saw a graph go up, and he said, this must be because they secretly buffed artillery, and he made a whole video on it. Okay, that's fine. He made a mistake. He apologized. But here's the kicker, okay? The official World of Tanks channel left a comment saying, oh, Skill, this is because of a moving average, not any sort of secret buffs. And his fucking comment section went wild, saying shit like, yeah, you were caught, stop lying, and oh yeah, stop making stuff up, Wargaming, we know you did this. I wonder if there's anything else he was wrong about that his worshippers believed without questioning. Guys, you can't be doing this. You blindly follow someone no matter what? Like, we call you NPCs for a reason. Who the fuck programmed you to worship these streamers? There's like some sort of hive mind on who you can criticize and who you can't. And don't even get me started on Ken's derangement syndrome. It's identical to Trump derangement syndrome, except instead of Trump, it's me. It's only recently that the Quickie Baby robots woke up and realized his plays are often kind of bad and his equipment choice is fucking retarded. People also started to realize that these creators have some of the most egregious, deplorable, clickbaiting garbage on all of the internet. They aren't even creators, I'm calling them recyclers. These content recyclers breed NPCs. Now, of course, it's fine if you watch them. It's no problem. The problem is when you just get up in arms and fight to the death over something you don't even fully understand. You guys need to just relax and chill out. I don't want to see no walls of texts, okay? I ain't reading all that. Okay, but it's not doom and gloom. Though we can't change the game or the content recyclers, but you can change yourself. And it's so easy. The easiest thing you could do is to just always be critical about what these people try to tell you. That's it. Don't hold any stupid allegiances to anyone. Just watch who you enjoy watching, and please, I say this again, please no walls of text, because nobody wants to read all that. There is something even better I want to teach you guys. It's an infinite money glitch, sort of. Even though I'm not breaking any rules here, I know for a fact that Wargaming will ban someone's account just for telling you guys. Well, they'll ban what they think is my account. Joke's on them. I sold all my accounts months ago. People now just lend me their accounts that I play on. I hop from account to account. I'm basically a nomad. In my personal opinion, it's better to not own anything. That way, they can't take anything from you. Right? There you go. Sounds kind of familiar, don't it? So whatever account they will ban doesn't matter to me. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys all this information. I just want to point out that for the longest time, Argentina accounts had a 90% discount on all World of Tanks goods. That's not a joke. 90% off. When I had an account back then, before I sold them all, I used to get tier 8 premiums for $4 USD. A war chest was 2,000 ARS, that's Argentinian pesos. So 2,000 ARS is 571 USD for 25,000 gold. This is who Quickie Baby was referring to when he said someone spent $4,000 on Christmas loot boxes to get the object 283.
They got themselves 1.2 million gold, 95,000 credits. They got themselves 300,000 resources, nearly 1,000 days of premium. But more importantly, they spent about $1,500 to $2,000 on these boxes. $4,400. So they spent $4,000 on loot crates, but spent 4,400 United States dollars.
They didn't. They paid $400. Stop spreading lies. I know this because it was my buddies who got that many loot boxes. This is why my main account has around 700,000 gold, and my buddy has actually 1.4 million gold on his account. And we spent only a few $100s. This is also why I'm releasing this video right before the Christmas loot boxes.
Need some change? No. Why? Because I'm all out of money.
Now, I get it. You spend so much on your account.
Got President Obama. I told him to raise his funds, you know what I'm saying?
You don't want to start fresh. I get it, but just understand this. This account has 500 games and 5 tier 10s already. That's 100 games per tier 10. That's nothing. It doesn't take that long to grind out tanks when you're basically a World of Tanks billionaire. As of recently, Wargaming changed it so that it's not 90% discount, but a 75% discount. But hey, look, this is still incredible. 75% discount? Think about this. Wargaming is constantly adding newer and better tanks, rendering all your old previous tanks obsolete anyway. I mean, holy shit, their gold sinks for the Object 780, Lion, and now the KPZ means that instead of having to spend like $300 to get a tank, you spend 10 bucks. Well, in reality, you spend nothing because you already have millions of gold from the loot boxes. You know, it's actually funny how World Tanks Gold acts like real life currency. When you have a little bit, you're very careful how you spend it. When you get a lot, you end up spending a lot more. The more money you have, the more you spend. When you have as much as I do, it literally becomes meaningless. Oh, this tank's 50k gold? Okay, well, I have 1.5 million gold. It's basically free. I want that. It's mine. There, got it. I didn't have to think about the price. The only thing I can spend this much gold on is free XP. I have one crew for all my Soviet heavies. I just retrain them for 1,000 gold every time I want to play a different tank. Gold is meaningless now. I could never spend this much gold in a lifetime. You know, unless I try to get 1 billion credits and beat termites.
Game's over, losers! I have all the money! Compare your lives to mine and then kill yourselves!
By the way, those of you that have the Object 780, do you still play it? Think about it. Do you play it enough to be worth the price tag? Okay, how about this? If you could sell the Object 780 right now for whatever currency you used to buy it with. So if you bought it for 50k gold, you can sell it for 50k gold. If you bought it for 20k bonds, you can sell it for 20k bonds. You know what I mean? Would you? Would you sell it? Think about that. I think the answer for most of you is yes, which means that purchase wasn't worth it in the end. Think about that the next time Wargaming is selling you some overpriced, overhyped tank. Before you go off and make Argentina accounts, understand that if you use a VPN, the place of residence will change after a month, so you will lose that discount. So you gotta find other ways. I won't say too much here, but I'm gonna say there's an untapped market here. Whoever's first to it will become very rich indeed. This was an underground secret for actually many years now, and I've released it to all of you. So please, take advantage of it now while you can. Don't let Wargaming scam you. Fight back. I know there are people watching this that don't play World of Tanks anymore, or people that play World of Tanks only because there aren't any alternatives. Or is there? I'm not talking about War Thunder. There are some other games that have sprung up. Sprocket. Sprocket is interesting and has great potential. However, the game doesn't have a massive amount of content just yet, but I think it's still worth a go. You've probably heard of Armored Warfare. That game had huge hype, but ultimately fell kind of short and wasn't really interesting enough to keep players invested. It is actually quite a fun game, even though it's unfinished. However, it's still a wargaming product, so I'd steer clear. Well, okay, I don't think I'd steer clear. I think you should give the game a go when it comes out, but just be wary about Wargaming's marketing tactics, right? The only other alternative I could find was a game called Steel Aces, which seems to combine War Thunder and World of Tanks mechanics with something like doing the damage when you shoot, which is a cool idea. It's still in very early development, which is probably why you haven't heard of it. In the future, if everything goes well, I'll probably play and Steel Aces. Although if it doesn't have Argentina discounts, I won't be buying anything. I refuse to give Wargaming like that much money. I'll give them a little bit of money, but not that much. Instead, I'd rather support a small startup game like Steel Aces, since that game reminds me of old World of Tanks, which is why I'm attracted to it. They also seem to clown on Wargaming, so that's a bonus. Is World of Tanks rigged? Yeah, but not in the way you think it is. There is no secret algorithm ruining your games, or advanced AI that knows all the unique and fun ways to make you suffer. Instead, it's rigged mentally. The game and its community designed to suck you in and drain your wallet willingly. Power creep, gambling, FOMO, the fear of missing out, etc. These are all very effective ways of wiring your brain or rigging your brain into spending more money on stuff you didn't even need. Hopefully, the last 2/3 of this video has taught you to be wary and avoid these tricks that they try to play on you. Understand that most of these people are not trying to help you or improve something. They're trying to make money. That's it. Simple as that. When they make money, you lose money. Stop it. Okay? Be smarter than that. Well, this was a very long and time-consuming video to make. My Why What Sucks video was 5,000 words. This was 9,000 words. This is the first time I've ever said this, and will probably be the last time I ever say this, but like, subscribe, and share the video to your friends. Now, okay, normally I don't care about things such as likes and subscribers because I'm not monetarily driven, but at least I think this is a very important video to share, just for the conspiracy disproving part alone. I think this video is very useful at educating the World of Tanks community, and I think things could genuinely improve if enough people learn. And that's why I want a lot of people to see this video, and that's why I encourage you to share it around. I'm actually willing to wager that a lot of chems haters,
people that's against me, the world call them ops, I call them retards,
stuck through and watched this entire video. Maybe that's you who I'm talking about right now. You watched this entire video even though they despise me and would never watch any of my other videos. But this is fantastic. This means that you've opened up your mind. You are willing to hear thoughts and opinions from people you normally would not have. You are escaping the NPC mindset. Plus, you have no idea what you're missing out on. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and have a lovely day.